speak of Rumi. And are we all good? Modern technology. Okay. I titled this Rumi, a Discourse. A favorite saying of Rumi's was, "Let me see things as they really are." Isn't that a courageous statement? Let me see things as they really are. We can see this intellectual courage running through all of his teachings, his discourses, the lessons he gave. I'm going to be discussing one of these discourses, but some knowledge of the times Rumi lived in is needed in order to understand the setting for these lessons. I'm going to be skipping pretty lightly over the swamp of details in order to fit this talk into a reasonable amount of time and get us all to potluck. It may be, perhaps, that the times he lived in required that kind of courage, for he was born into a dangerous and bloody time. It was a time when ambitious young dynasties could rise or they could fall on the might of their swords. One such rising dynasty, the Khurram Shah, seized Balkh, Rumi's birthplace, a city on the ancient Silk Road in the year before young Jalal al-Din Muhammad, later known as Rumi, was born. He was born in 1207 on September 30th. And while I was researching, I looked up the year 1207 in the timetables of history concerning Europe, and not much was happening. 2 years prior, St. Francis of Assisi established his order, but Europe overall remained mired in the medieval swamp. At the height of the Muslim hegemony, centers of learning arose in the hinterlands of the Caliphate. In Iberia to the west rose Seville, where the Alhambra remains a human treasure. In sub-Saharan the south, fabled Timbuktu is still famous for its libraries and collections of ancient scrolls and manuscripts. If anyone is interested in the history of Timbuktu and wants a cracking good read, they should pick up a copy of The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. Yeah, that's two words you don't often hear together, badass and librarians. It tells how courageous librarians saved these relics from the forces of fundamentalism when Islamic militants took control of the city. And eastward in what is now Afghanistan, Balkh, in the province of Khorasan, was famous not only for its wealth, derived from a location on the age-old trading routes between Asia and Europe, but also as a center of religious scholarship through the centuries. Rumi's father, Baha al-Din Valad of Balkh, was highly regarded for his learning and insight. He claimed a direct line of descent from the first caliph of Islam, Abu Bakr, and was a leader in the community of Sufi mystics, coming into conflict with another scholar, Fakhr al-Din al-Razi. Both men sought royal patronage. A common assertion is that Fakhr al-Din was the force behind the Khurramshahs turning against the Sufis and drowning one of the leaders of the circle to which Baha al-Din belonged. As I said earlier, dangerous times. However, for all the palace intrigue and the general hubbub and tumult of the time, life went on in Balkh. Went on until the year 1219, when the family fled the approaching armies of Genghis Khan and escaped the Golden Horde's brutal ransacking of Balkh. One eyewitness estimated that over 700,000 people were slain or taken captive by the Mongol forces. This began years of wandering for the young man, his parents, and other members of their community of Sufis. Their travels gradually took them to Baghdad. From there, they made the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, from Mecca to Syria, to Armenia, where it is likely that Rumi encountered Christian mysticism, and eventually to Konya, the capital city of the Seljuk Empire, this at the invitation of the Seljuk ruler. According to legend, Konya was the resting place for Plato's bones. St. Paul visited this ancient city, in his time known as Iconium, 3 times. Here, Baha al-Din served as a teacher and a preacher until his death in 1230. At this point, his son Jalal, now 23 years old, assumed his father's position, preaching to before the royalty and teaching the sons of the wealthy. He did, for about 7 years, leave Konya to study at Aleppo and Damascus, returning to Konya in 1240. During all this time, he lived as a perfectly orthodox follower of Islam. It is a rich irony that as a young man, Jalal al-Din had scant interest in poetry, which was not highly regarded by the religious community of Khorasan. At one point in his discourses, he states that I am affectionate to such a degree that when these friends come to me, for fear that they may be wearied, I speak poetry, so that they may be occupied by that. Otherwise, what have I to do with poetry? Today, it is his discourses rather than poetry that I am discussing, a topic less well known than his verse and a rockier field to plow, but an enlightening look into the mind of not just a great religious scholar, but one on his way to becoming a great mystic saint. Like his poetry, his discourses are delivered off the cuff, extemporaneously. He hops from one thought, one topic to another, frequently changing course with a statement such as, "It comes to my mind to speak of such and such a topic." These discourses range from theology to the history of Islam and to the politics of his day. For instance, the first discourse opens with Rumi commenting on a statement by Muhammad that the worst of scholars is he who visits princes. The best of princes is he who visits scholar. Jalal al-Din comments that this is not to be taken as a literal statement that a scholar should never call on a prince. His thought would be echoed centuries later by the great Scottish poet Robert Burns in the poem For Ah That and Ah That, sometimes referred to as There for Honest Poverty, with the lines, a duke, a lord, a belted knight, their tinsel show and all that. A man, O independent mind, he looks and laughs at all that. It is to Rumi's mind in the intent of the scholar that the difference is made. Does one undertake learning to better serve God or to better serve the prince? If the scholar is of independent mind, it does not matter whether it is the prince being visited or the scholar. It is the scholar who is being honored. Otherwise, the scholar is dragged into the service of the prince. An Arab proverb says, "We have learned in order to give. We have not learned in order to take." Rumi speaks of this in a poem. It's not really part of the discourse. There are 2 kinds of intelligence. One acquired as a child in school, memorizes facts and concepts from books and what the teacher says, collecting information from the traditional sciences as well as from the new sciences. With such intelligence, you rise in the world. You get ranked ahead or behind others in regard to your competence in retaining information. You stroll with this intelligence in and out of fields of knowledge, always getting more marks on your preserving tablets. There is another kind of tablet, one already completed and preserved inside you, a spring overflowing its spring box, a freshness in the center of the chest. This other intelligence does not turn yellow or stagnate. It's fluid, and it doesn't move from outside to inside through the conduits of plumbing learning. This second knowing is a fountainhead from within you moving out. From here he veers, although it is not related to the current discourse, into commenting on a verse from the Quran. This verse tells of an event during the war between the community of Islam and the residents of Mecca. After he defeated the forces of Mecca and took many prisoners, the Prophet Muhammad looked upon the prisoners at their weeping and wailing, and he laughed. To his prisoners, this seemed callous and uncaring. The prophet told them that his joy came from seeing the people being dragged by main force from disbelief into belief. At this point, he confronts his uncle Abba, one of the unbelievers. He demands that Abba give over his property to the army of Islam. Not surprisingly, Abba demurs. Muhammad then demonstrates that he knows how and where Abba has cached and dispersed his property to avoid it being found. This serves to convince the uncle that his nephew truly does have divine insight, at which point Abba raised his finger in token of complete acceptance of the faith. Rumi cited this incident, we are told by the scribe, in response to the actions of the late Sultan's powerful prime minister, the true power in Kenya at that time, Parvana Muin al-Din. Rumi tells us that the Parvana initially presented himself as a true protector and champion of the Ummah, saying that he would make himself a ransom. He announced that he would surrender his reason, deliberation, and judgment to ensure the continued survival of Islam and the increase of its followers. It seems that all the Parvana's pretty words came to naught. He had, Rumi informs us, put his faith in his own judgment and allied himself with the Mongol Khan. Kanya became a Mongol vassal state. The walls of Kanya were destroyed, but we are told that the population was spared out of great respect for Jalal al-Din. At this point in Rumi's life, the forces of the Golden Horde were sweeping across the land. Apparently invincible, they sacked Baghdad in 1258, seemingly unbeatable, except to the Mamluk rulers of Egypt. Rumi advised the Parvana to join the Seljuk forces with those of Egypt in order to oppose the forces of the Khan. The aforementioned story of Muhammad and his uncle Abba is pertinent because Rumi advised the Parvana to give alms and put his faith in God in a humble petition in defense of the body of Islam. In the end, the Parvana took the advice of the scholar and stood forth against the invaders. In the year 1260, the Mamluk forces gained victory, went on to destroy many of the Mongol strongholds along the Syrian coast. However, the country of Anatolia remained a Mongol vassal. Much abbreviated, this is a history of Rumi's time. It was a time of vast upheaval, the destruction of cities and the massacre of their citizens, forced migrations by those fleeing the onslaught. In the discourses of Rumi, we are witness to the depth of his learning, the extent to which he was steeped in the teachings of Islam. We get a glimpse into the thoughts of a man so revered that the inhabitants of his city were spared out of veneration of him. We also begin to understand that the mystic need not disdain reality. Let me see things as they really are. It may perhaps have seemed more prudent to go along with the prime minister in his alliance with the great Khan. To Rumi, though, the true path was to stand against the invaders, and eventually the Khans would convert to Islam. For Rumi, the religion of Muhammad would prevail. The Ummah would be secure. Rumi's great faith in the divine would hold him through the dark hours when it may have seemed that all would be swept from him again, as it was in his youth. It is said that a prophet is without honor in his own land, but the life of Rumi disputes that. Honored in his time and in his place for his learning and his piety, he lives on today, perhaps not as a prophet, but as a mystic visionary. His words live on in part because these times of ours are fraught with dangers. Danger from climate change. We see how heavy weather can impact us, whether we dwell in the city or in the countryside. The potential for danger confronts us when we go out in public places. Political malfeasance can endanger the stability of our lives, as can political extremism. Simply to go to the store can be an act of courage. How? Where may we find courage? Courage may be found in the most unlikely of places. It may be found in the writings of a 13th century poet, a poet who prayed to be shown things as they truly are. With that thought, please allow me to leave you with one final poem from Rumi. Muhammad could mediate for every kind of disgrace because he looked so unswervingly at God. His eye medicine came from his ever expanding into God. Any orphan daubed with that salve will get better. He could see all the attainments of those on the way. Hence, God called him the witness. The tools of the witness are truthfulness and keen seeing and the night vigil. This is the witness a judge listens to most carefully. A false witness has some self interest that makes his testimony specious. He can't see the whole. That's why God wants you to deny your desires so you will learn how to give up self interest. It's the love of the manifest world that makes you an unreliable witness. There is another way of seeing that sees through your love of this place, through the exciting drunkenness to the headache. The witness can cure that hurting. God is the just judge who calls the true witness, the eye of pure love, the darling, the dalliance, the reason inside, the playfulness that created phenomena. Go forward bravely, with courage, good heart. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Blessed be, thou art God. And thank you very much. And now we will get some people that will have our offering. We can get a couple of people to pass the plate and our pre-offering prayer. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Father, Mother, God. Keep it flowing.